basically the same concept, but instead of now position or velocity, this could be in two angles. And similar way, how we constrain this two is by forming the Lagrangian, as we've done in classical mechanics. And then we have the Euler-Lagrange equation. All right, so far so good. Nothing new, and we can also look at it in terms of the Hamiltonian, and basically once we go into the Hamiltonian picture, we look at same thing, two quantities we're trying to handle and we're trying to constrain, and when now P becomes the canonical momentum, becomes that, and you have your Hamiltonian, which now depends on Q and P. Yeah, so far so good. So basically, the whole of classical mechanics, we can think of it like that we've got two quantities we try to manage, and in a talk given by Stephen Hawking, it was titled Gödel and the End of the Universe. He made a strong case to say that scientific determinism, as far as physics is concerned, it says that if you know the velocity and the position of every particle in the whole universe, then you can use classical mechanics to determine its future and its past and everything about the whole universe. So it was understood as an ambitious thing that, you know, we've got these two quantities we're always trying to handle. But now when we switch to quantum mechanics, we know that the uncertainty principle tells us that we can't know both the velocity, the momentum, and the position simultaneously. So now he made the case that instead of now handling two quantities, which are, you know, there's a second order differential equation, so if you know the initial conditions, you can solve it uniquely. Now, instead of handling two quantities, we handle one quantity, which is the probability okay. We've all seen this, and also now, just like we did here, we've got two quantities, we have equations that constrain them so we can solve it uniquely. Here we also have the world famous equation, Schrödinger's equation, for the quantitative side. So that constrains it, and we also learn more things that, you know, now H as an operator depends, H becomes a function of P and Q. So it means what we did here, these were dynamical variables. When we go to switch to quantum mechanics, we promote these dynamical variables, which are observable, to become operators. So observables are promoted to operators. That was the part of the constructions of quantum mechanics, that we can do that. And now, because they become operators, to quantize them, we impose a commutation relationship. That's basically all we know, classical and quantum. So now this works well, and why field theory? The problem is, why we need field theory is whereby we now impose a further principle in physics, the principle of relativity. So before we see the problems with relativity in quantum mechanics, let's look at it in classical picture. In the classical picture, once we go to special relativity, the two quantities we try to handle become four vectors like this. And they now have further constraints. Thus, the line element which is what would, this condition says that the line elements between two frame of references stays the same. So in other words, we have Lorentz invariance as a symmetry, meaning if you, in one coordinate system, you had that and you apply the Lorentz transformation to get that prime, the condition is that when you take the inner products, they must be equal. I gotta write that thing. So that is, those kind of transformations that preserve this condition are called Lorentz transformations. And another condition we get is that P, okay, which is the Marshall condition. Another way of looking at this is this. Okay. And I can go further for those who are not necessarily in physics in the room, that this, if P is equals to 0, this gives you the famous equation by Einstein, E is equals to mc squared. Yeah. And what we know from this is that now suddenly you can't have the system going anywhere in space. So now it's constrained. If you are looking at it in if you are looking at it in Minkowski space, Minkowski space is a space whereby this metric G nu is 1 0 0 0 0 -1. Okay, so so now we've got that condition of causality becoming an intrinsic feature in when you impose the principle of relativity. And also because of this equation, as a consequence, we know that if E is greater than that, we can create particles. Eh? So how does that become a problem when we come to quantum mechanics? Well, to see that, let's look at a free particle in quantum mechanics and calculate the. So we wanna calculate if we take a free particle. Okay, and for a free particle, we can set that to that. Yeah, we've seen this before, and if we do this calculation, as you can see here, we will need to have insert the unitary operator. And here and here, so we'll have this Okay, and just to save some time, you can do this calculation. You see that this will be your plane wave, and you get a Gaussian integral, and I can import the answer. To be that. Right. So now this is the probability that the particle will evolve from the state x naught to the state x. And we see the problem with this is that if, for instance, just for simplicity, we can take t equals 1, right? And ignoring this term, this will be proportional to e to power what this tells us, because this is like a complex exponential, so it's an oscillating function. So now if x and x naught are distances far away that outside the light cone, this tells us that the probability of the particle from going there is still non-zero, and that's a problem. That violates causality. Yeah? So, in a sense, quantum mechanics has got this intrinsic problem. You can also say, oh, well, maybe we started with an expression that's not relativistic. For instance, what if we make this case, and you can convince yourself that what we'll get is something that looks like this. Which still has the same problem that if you have x squared much greater than t squared outside the light cone, this is small but still non-zero. So causality is violated. And we can make the same case that, so special relativity, when we impose special relativity, we have, okay, so we have causality becoming a problem, and two, you know, from the Schrödinger equation, there's no way you can create particles from it. So the number of the particle number still becomes a problem. So that means you can do a lot with quantum mechanics for sure, but as things become relativistic, this is what I was trying to put out as a point, that you run into troubles, and hence we need field theory. Okay, so now we know why we need it. Let us look at. So field theory, as we said here, the object here is a probability wave function. Here in field theory, what we have is now phi, which is a field. And instead, here we promoted dynamic variables into operators. Here we demote them for very good reasons. One, we want to treat space and time in equal footing. So now when we say phi becomes the operator now instead. So phi will depend on T, where X is just the three-dimensional vector. I just write X. It's convention. And as well, you know, we can construct a Lagrangian density similar to that, whereby we have that. Now, instead of, okay, I erase it there. Now we see that this becomes the fourth derivative with space and time as well. And to create, then now we will have an Euler-Lagrange equation for the field, which will depend on this quantity here. Okay? And you apply the derivative there, right? And then depend on phi equals 0. Yeah. So we have that, and I was going to show you an example, but we can skip it because our aim is to get to talk about Feynman diagrams. Okay.